Oh.
Well, hello. Everyone. We're getting notes in the chat
in the private chat, like, hey,
no one can hear you.
We're professionals, I swear.
Hey, everybody.
What did we just say?
We just said that it was Tuesday night, not Monday night, which is really throwing Liam and I, because it 100% feels like it's a Monday.
It does. It's how we kick off our week.
Yeah.
But we got back.
Yeah, I was about to say, Liam, what did you do this weekend?
I had a low-key weekend, traveling to Anaheim. But no, it was a great weekend. Aaron and we all got back late last night.
Mm-hmm.
Had a great time at the Disney Lorcana North American Championship.
We did at that.
We're gonna show one picture while we.
My second favorite part of the weekend, maybe tied for first.
Yeah,
I'll say tied for first favorite part of the weekend.
Yeah, this
is so Mickey, this moment.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
It's a family game. This is really cute. Yeah, Elena, like, she likes the characters from afar, and then as soon as you get up close, sometimes she's skeptical. So
you didn't get to witness this. She actually did really well with Mickey. Oh. Mickey was wonderful. He was fantastic. We got to actually, anytime he didn't have a line, Elena and I went up and said hello again. And then by the end of the weekend, she was like booping his snoot, like touching his nose.
Yeah.
And gave him several high fives. It was great. It was wonderful. It was a lot of fun.
That was a ton of fun.
Yeah.
And there was also a Lorcana tournament.
What?
Yeah. There's also a Lorcana tournament.
It was just Mickey in a ballroom, right?
Yeah. But it was, yeah. So the event overall, I mean, I'm not going to talk. So I heard a lot of ups and downs about the event. We're not going to talk here about a lot of the sustains and improves because there's always things you can improve in every event. There's always things you can sustain. Unfortunately, like, Aaron was buttoned down most of the day with Elena and kind of hanging out there, and I was commentating. So a lot of the things that people experience with side events and all that, like,
I did get to play one game of Pack Rush all weekend.
Yeah.
So with a local friend of ours who decided to be patient enough with our daughter to let me attempt to get through an entire game of Pack Rush. That was about it. But all that, instead, we're going to spend about an hour talking about the meta, what we saw, like cool decks, cool plays. And then of course, some guy is coming on later to talk about, like, I don't know, winning. Yeah. The, what you all are probably here for, to hear from the very first Disney Lorcana North American champion, Mr. Ed Chiu, and fantastic performance. So if you're here, thanks for joining us. Feel free to ask questions throughout the show in the chat, on whatever platform you're on, and we'll highlight it, and we can ask questions of our guest if there are plays you want to highlight, etc. And thanks for joining us. I see just like so many friends that we got to see in the chat. So welcome to the show. Hope everybody made it home safe. A lot of people in the chat that I saw this weekend. So yeah, be our guest, Heath, Freedom Gaming, Dan and Lily, Enchanted Kim, Wonderland, Bobby Brick. Yeah, it's so fun. Anyway, all right, let's bring in our first guest. We have a few guests here to help us break down the tournament this weekend and ask Ed some questions and break it down. First, he is the man behind the curtain, an integral part of the broadcast who you all don't know. And a new neighbor of ours, apparently. A new neighbor of ours. It is Mr. Lorcana. It's Hal Brady. Hey. Hello. How are you, Hal?
Fantastic. I haven't got anything set up in my computer room yet. Like, I just moved to Austin, but yeah, there's a bunch of junk behind me still. But hopefully soon, I'll have some cool stuff behind me.
Well, yeah. Welcome to Austin. We're so excited to add you to our local community as well as just like our online family. So, yeah. Yay.
Sure.
The reason I said Hal is the man behind the curtain, Hal, for all you watching, Hal was not at the championship this weekend, but he kind of was. Hal, what were you doing this weekend?
So on the stream, you're watching, it's a top-down view, everybody, competing. There's these cards on the side, and it's not AI. AI has not taken this job yet. So I'm physically searching and putting up the cards on the live stream, either just like as like a play-by-play thing or what you guys are talking about in the booth, just throwing up stuff. I play a little side mini game with myself. I try to play as the third caster sometimes, especially when the commentators are like, oh, I don't know what he could possibly do here. And I'm like, I do. Just put the card up on the screen and see if you guys notice. And most of the time you do. It was awesome.
Yeah.
I I love it how I feel like it was the first DLC that you were doing this for, and like Liam was stumped on a card and then you pulled it up on the screen and like he was like, oh yeah, it's that card. And it just like, you know, I just imagine you kind of in the background like, hello.
Yeah.
You are absolutely the third caster.
Yeah.
I'm not a caster, but I will 100% say that you are the third caster.
Yeah. It's pretty fun. Hal makes us all look pretty smart on the stream because there's sometimes he cues us up, and if we miss draws or things like that, sometimes they have things in their hand that we don't see, and we're like, I wonder what he has in his hand, and Hal's like,
yeah, I think that was what was it. That was what was happening is you didn't know what the player had in their hand, and you had seen it, you popped up the card, and Liam's like, oh yeah, of course that this is what they had in their hand.
Yeah, it's super fun. Hal, what do you think about the what we saw this weekend in terms of meta and deck builds?
So it's funny. I think the metagame was even more predictable than like I thought. Like there were like basically no surprises. Like obviously people had different, you know, unique card choices. I was like kind of blazing through all the deck lists before the tournament started too, just going through all the notable names, see if anybody brought something crazy. I was hoping like somebody broke like Emerald Sapphire, right? Like someone made some unstoppable combo deck that's going to get banned, and they just kept it in their back pocket for this tournament. No, the entire tournament was very predictable to a shocking degree. I think it was, you know, I think everybody went into this tournament like knowing that Ruby Sapphire is going to be the most popular, maybe less Ruby Amethyst than people thought. And then, the new Amber Steel, like aggressive Diggy Hole deck. I mean, it was kind of like the new hotness going into this from like, you know, the previous tournaments that, you know, it like won the last big tournament leading up to this weekend. But yeah, there was kind of like not really a lot of surprises as far as the deck goes. But what I thought was cool is like watching the top 8 and the top, like just the day 2 in general I was so giddy as a fan of the game and just competitive play, because it was like you had all these notable players that are in like day 2 of nationals with the deck that they've been playing all year. It was just like, everybody I talked to was like, Emerald Sapphire is unplayable. You can't play Diablo, blah, blah, blah. Zan Saeed back, just whooping everybody, doesn't care. He's like, I'm still on green still. This is what I do. You know, whatever. This is how I'm going to get there. You know, Ed's not, you know, he's known for playing Ruby Amethyst. Not a surprise, just masterful play. So I think it's funny people kind of discounted decks going into it, but that archetype has a champion, and like there were several in there. And, you know, Zach Bivens on the Steel Amethyst, like he's been, you know, piloting that style of the deck for a while now. So it was just cool just watching like, you know, the top players playing the same deck. They didn't give it up. They're just, this is what I'm doing. I know how to do it. I'm the best at it too. So it was a lot of fun to watch.
I mean that's true. Ed Chiu with Ruby Amethyst. I mean, master of that deck. You had Sailor bring in Ruby Sapphire, like that's his deck. Yeah, that's super fun. I am interested to get somebody else's take on the metagame and games, and somebody we always like having on the channel. It hasn't been that long, but from across the pond, it's the man, the villain himself. It's Baker, Lorcana villain.
Hello there. How are we doing?
Ta-da!
Hello, Baker. Thanks for joining us again.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure. Yeah, it's not been that long since I was on last, and what we were discussing before we went live, there's normally been big gaps between Baker appearances on the show. But yeah, it wasn't too long ago. But when you sent a message my way today offering to jump on with your lovely selves, and of course the champion himself to come.
Yes,
that's not an offer I'm gonna turn down lightly. So 2 o'clock in the morning, be it. I am here and very happy to be here. And I've got a new desk, which I'm super excited about. Like, it's like you can tell like what point of life I'm at, where I'm like, okay, treat for myself as a new desk. I've had my eye on it for a few months, couldn't justify it, but finally we bit the bullet from post EU championship, so I can play paper Lorcana now at my desk, which I'm super excited for. So yeah, it's been a good day, and yeah, had an incredible weekend watching the North American Championships, which I was blown away by in so many respects. And I'm sure we'll dive into various layers of that throughout the show. But yeah, absolutely loved it. Hats off to yourself, Liam, and of course to Rebecca, to Tannen, to Brendan, to Brandon, and of course PPG in general. And yeah, it was great. I loved a lot about the production. I thought the casting was the highest quality I've seen so far, and that's not a knock on the previous. That's just I thought everyone was like really top of their game. The synergy was there, like, and you can see where chemistry has really grown over the year between different casters. Like that was super evident. And yeah, love the production. I'd just like to say, PPG, you're welcome for the idea of the moving players. I debuted that in the Dick Burns versus Baker video. Good to know PPG are watching. Yeah, you're welcome. I'm joking, of course, but I absolutely loved that. The production, the lounge that Rebecca was in, and I think you got to be in there at a point or two, Liam, as well, or at least see it. So yeah, loved it. And what a stacked day 2.
Oh, I know.
What a stacked day 2. I retweeted the Disney Lorcana. It was great that they had photos of everybody that they took on site, and yeah, they released the top 16, and I retweeted it. Like, some of my favorite wrestlers are on this card. This is look at these names. we got Ed Chiu, on here, RMB, Zach Bivens, Zan Zayed, Sailor, and more. And like that's just one page I'm looking at here. Like, it was absolutely
it's incredible.
Yeah. So yeah, great weekend for Lorcana. Absolutely loved it. Hats off to everyone involved. Hats off to all the players. And yeah, super excited to be here and get to hear from Ed firsthand.
Yeah, which I'm super excited about. Well, with that, I mean, should we bring him in?
Just welcome the
bring
guest
him in?
of honor.
Yeah, the guest of honor. All right.
Nobody wants to hear from the 4 of us. Everybody came here for a reason.
Yeah, that's true. He is the only one on the thumbnail. Well, with that, fresh off his win
and off of an 8-hour day of work today.
An 8-hour day of work today. It's your first Disney Lorcana North American champion, Mr. Ed Chiu. Hey!
Yay!
Hey, he won with RP. Of course, I'm impressed. Oh, master, my master.
Oh man. Before, well, I want to play a video clip, but first, Ed, what does it feel like to be the champion?
Like I told you earlier, I feel like just another day, to be honest. Like, no ego, I swear. But I feel like I don't know. I feel like you can't replicate that first win. You know what I mean? And I felt like that was like kind of my high point in Fort Worth. And this one, I mean, yeah, it's sweet, but it's not the same, you know? Maybe I'm underplaying it. I don't know. But for me right now, I'm just kind of like, you know, just hanging out.
You had very different reactions. I thought you were like up and like up. It was incredible. This one seemed more like relief.
Having the opportunity, Ed, to actually like be there live for both of your wins, it was so different because in Fort Worth, like we all were like literally watching you and your reaction the moment you won and the entire, like the fact that you immediately saw the crowd and we all went insane. It was just different because for those of you who weren't at the event, this event, Ed was like behind a screen. So he wins, the whole crowd goes wild. And then we had to wait to actually see him until we got to the end of the ceremony. And I think everybody was just like waited, especially your team was going crazy. All they wanted to do, you could tell, was just like rush the stage and congratulate you. But it was so exciting to actually like witness you live with this massive, massive accomplishment. And the energy in the room was absolutely incredible in that moment. So
yeah, I mean, they had it on delay. I think it was like a 7-minute delay or something. So after the game was over, I was just kind of hanging out like, I need to use the restroom real quick. And then they like snuck me out through the side or whatever. And it came back. Still not ending yet. Okay, I guess I'll just wait a little bit. So
that had to be so crazy for you when you heard us all like lose our minds in the audience.
Yeah.
Well, you should have go around the back and then like gone up to a friend like, how's it going?
Yeah, I mean, I could have done that, but no, they escorted me into the bathroom. You know what I mean? Yeah,
it was not supposed to be that delayed. What happened? There was that technical issue in the middle, which caused the delay. It was supposed to be a lot shorter, but let's take a look real quick, because for those who missed it, let's just see
This is the moment we've all been
here
waiting for. We have had 6 Disney Lorcana challenges across North America, and leading up to this moment, to get this beautiful trophy, we have your very first Disney Lorcana North American champion. Please give it up for Edmund Chiu. Come on over. I'm gonna give you a high five too. You got some friends here. You've got a whole crew. I love it. Tell us how you felt in that moment when you had that win.
That game was pretty close, honestly. Like, he was at 17 lore, and I had to kind of pick it up, right? So I did my, signature triple location play. And yeah, it turned out to work out for me. He didn't have the answers to those cards, and picked up the win.
Yeah, I remember those Queen's Castles from before. Would you say that was the most pivotal moment for you this weekend, or was there something else that stands out to you that brought you to this point?
I've honestly never played Library until yesterday, and I got that idea from Friday at the LCQ. I saw a lot of people play that card, and I was like, wow, that card's pretty good. So, I have to give some props to the LCQers for that one.
Amazing. Well, congratulations. The last thing is there anyone that you would like to thank?
Oh yeah, of course. My Team Tianhu. And SLTC, and I'm really happy my girlfriend Emily was able to come today. She wasn't at Dallas, but it was nice to win in front of her.
Well, congratulations. Why don't you head on over there, get those beautiful prizes? Let's hear it for Ed. And thank you all for an amazing first season of the Disney Lorcana.
All right. I mean, we had to do it again.
Nice. It's like I watched that many times. Right?
Have you already?
It's always nice to watch it again. A couple times.
Oh, okay.
As you
Nice
should.
little
As
moment.
you should. Soak
Should,
it in.
yeah.
Soak it up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're just having a bad day, throw that clip on real quick. And
Instantly cheers me up. Yeah.
Yeah. Should have kept some of those streamers and hung them in the background there. Let's take a look at your deck, because you saw fascinating build for a couple of reasons. One, as you mentioned, I have to highlight again, never played libraries until the day before you threw them in. They seemed to come in handy, particularly in the finals there, game 3. You also, as we highlighted in the broadcast, everybody is talking this entire set, especially going into the championship, about Genie and how it's all about the Genie wars. As a result, you see Elsa's in the list to deal with genies, and it just seems to be everybody's trying to figure out how to tackle that one card, and you come in and don't run them. You also have Lady Tremaine's in place of other removal options like Madame Medusa. Lady Tremaine kind of fell out of favor. She was I don't know, less than $1 on TCG player for a while. You may have caused her to spike. I haven't checked yet. But there's some interesting choices here. What's going on?
Yeah. So yeah, Genie Wars is probably the biggest thing that is not in this list in particular. And I definitely think that Genie and Elsa do come in a pair, because I think they work well together, right? You get the 4 strength, combined strength to deal with other genies. So if you were to run Genie, I would definitely run probably the same amount of Elsa in this list. But something I kind of noticed was that Genie was very kind of lackluster in that Ruby Sapphire matchup, because it only got 1 card, right? So you play it, they play Brawl. Most of the Ruby Sapphire decks are Brawl, Sisu, Ice Block, those type of cards. So you don't get that quote unquote infinite value as the rabbit would get, right? So because of that reason, I decided to not play Genie. And because I didn't play Genie, I didn't play Elsa either. I also noticed that a lot of these newer iterations of these aggro strategies went really, really fast, right? Especially Doc in particular. There's a lot of kind of non-games where they go 1 ink card into 2 1 ink cards, and then more cheap cards, and then on the fourth turn, they would play, they would empty their hand, dock, draw 2 more cards, empty their hand again. And if you really think about it like that, like these 5 cost cards basically come down too late and you can't really come back from that. So I decided to kind of omit a Maui as well and decided to add 2 copies of Merlin Crab. Historically speaking, I don't really like this card because I think Maui usually does a better job. But I think in this particular meta, Maui was a little bit too kind of slow. And I wanted the Crab to kind of fill that slot. And in order to kind of complement Crab, you need some bodies, right? And I thought the best bodies were still the Chernobog and Broom. And I think the Diablo also fits really nicely with this Crab. And earlier I said that, I've never played Library. And on Friday, I saw some people play Library, but with like the Minnie Mouse. And they put the Minnie Mouse in the Library. And I thought that was like fine and reasonable. But it's like, what if instead we put like Chernobog or Diablo or Magic Broom? And now you're basically turning these kind of 1 cost cards to draw 2 cards. And I thought that was like very powerful. And I think in a lot of my feature matches, I got to draw tons of cards off of a single library. And that's not something that Genie can ever do, right? So I thought the 4 libraries complemented the 12 1-cost draw cards very well. So I definitely wanted like the full package of those. Also, a lot of people are trying to cut Flynn Rider, thinking like, oh, it's such a bad card on the draw. But I think on the play, it's so powerful. I think if you play it, a lot of the time you just win the game, or you put your opponent in kind of like a tough position where they have to deal with Flynn and not really, do their game plan, right? So I really like the additional 1-drops as well in case you miss the Flynn Rider. And that does happen. Like in some of my games, I didn't have Flynn Rider, but luckily I had, some of these 1 costs to try to hold down the board until I can get to like later stages of the game to play like a Sisu, for example, and then a Rabbit, and then now my engine starts going. About Tremaine in particular, I think Tremaine was always kind of like my pet card, and I always wanted to play it whenever I could. So in Dallas, I decided to play 2 Medusa, 2 Sisu because the Sapphire matchup I thought was not there, right? Sapphire was actually very unpopular at the time. Everyone was playing like Emerald or Amber style decks. So I felt like it didn't make sense there. But I kind of predicted that Ruby Sapphire was going to be like a huge amount of the metagame. And I noticed that like a lot of the top players were playing Ruby Sapphire. And so my goal was to try to prey on those players and potentially just split with everyone else. So something interesting about 2-game format is you actually don't need to win every single game. You just need to win like 3 2-0s, and you can actually draw 4 times and you would actually get into day 2. So that was kind of my game plan. Like if there's 7 rounds, my goal is to try to face like 3 red blue and go 2-0 on those matchups, and then maybe split with the rest and I'm into day 2, and then maybe I'll face even more Ruby Sapphire, and then that's how I would try to win the tournament. Unfortunately for me though, I only faced 1 Ruby Sapphire on day 1. And I got kind of lucky that I was able to kind of pull out against the other matchups, or kind of find a way to kind of get out of it. Because I mean, even though it's like, yes, this is for Sapphire, like Lady Tremaine still kind of banishes anything, right? As long as you have the correct setup. And the only kind of place where she kind of falls behind is when there's like a really wide board, right? So I think Tremaine and Be Prepared works really well together because it's kind of like a fork, right? You play too many characters, you get Be Prepared. Play too little characters, you get Tremaine. And then I think the Sisu also complements the Tremaine in that sense as well. Now you have an additional fork, right? You play too many small characters, you also get Sisu Empowered Sibling. And it's kind of similar to what I did in Dallas in terms of, having additional kind of these sweeper cards to be able to kind of clean up the board. So you can get these like favorable Lady Tremaine plays. So everything else, though, I think is pretty standard. But, obviously the big ones are, no Genie, no Elsa, no Maui, no Medusa. And instead we play, Diablo, Library, Tremaine, Sisu. And then the 2 crabs, I think, are probably the weakest cards against Ruby Sapphire, but I thought it was okay just because, you know, if you look at the other 58, those are really, really powerful against Ruby Sapphire, and I felt very comfortable in that matchup. So I was kind of okay maybe throwing 2 guards in there for potential aggro from the early game. And yeah, I mean, it just worked out for me.
Yeah. A couple people pointing out, you know, library helped them in the LCQ. And Katie, Lorekeeper's in, wants to know what you dropped for those libraries at the last minute. So yeah, what did it look like before you made that swap?
Yeah, so I think the most standard build of Ruby Sapphire or Ruby Amethyst do not have any Diablos, and I think they probably have, you know, maybe a couple copies of Crab, maybe 2, and then, you know, 4 Genie, 4 Elsa, 4 Maui, and it has like the 2 Tremaine, 2 Medusa, no big Sisu. That's like the most extremely standard, you know, run of the mill kind of Ruby Amethyst deck. So if you really think about it from that sense, the library kind of replaced Genie in terms of the draw power, right? And then in terms of like the removal aspect, like if you think about it, Maui and Elsa are kind of just like strictly removal cards. They don't, like, Maui just quests straight up for 0, right? And Elsa quests for 1, but most of her purpose is just to, you know, get the exert one time, maybe sing friends on it after you get that exert. And that's kind of her main purpose. So I basically played like the Sisu and the Crab in those type of removal slots in order to supplement the lack of removal after you remove the Maui and the Elsa. And then Diablo is just, you know, additional redundancy for the 1-cost cards, always being able to open a 1-cost, because I think it's actually quite important now to have a 1-cost on turn 1 because of like Ruby Sapphire just not have anything, so you can get a lot of free lore that way. And I think even though I expected like a huge Ruby Sapphire meta, I also thought there was going to be like some Emerald decks running Curse Merfolk. And if you don't have a clean answer to Curse Merfolk, it's going to be quite difficult to kind of navigate those matchups. And that's why I think a lot of people didn't run Diablo, because Diablo doesn't really interact with your opponent, right? If you really think about it. And I think that's also the reason why you can't run something like Moana. I know a lot of people really love that card. You know, oh, I can quest, and it's a 3/2. It's so big, right? But the problem is it doesn't really challenge that well. And the way I like to play the game is I want to be able to interact with my opponent, because that's where you really get to showcase your skill, right? Like if everyone just plays aggro and discard, like no offense to anyone that plays aggro or discard, but it's like it's not like linear, but like it's linear in the sense that, you know, you have your game plan, your proactive game plan, and you're kind of just figure out how to, you know, get that puzzle to 20. But if you're playing like a reactive game plan, you're more like trying to figure out the puzzle of, you know, how do I stop my opponent from winning the game? And to me, that puzzle is a little bit more fun. So that's why I decided to go Ruby Amethyst instead.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, you highlighted the Merfolk. There were some aggressive decks. Mo Shamblin piloting his way into the top 8 and Worlds qualification on his aggro, you know, low to the ground Emerald Amethyst deck. Yeah, made good use of those. So wanted to make sure I shouted him out here. Yeah. So Baker, Hal, if you have any questions, I've got some questions in the chat, but feel free to jump in. I'm Baker. I know you had some stuff you were dying to ask.
Well, like the stuff I'm dying to ask is less related to the deck and more a different topic. So we'll save that, and I'll be brief now and just say, because like I haven't really got a lot to ask, because like Ed's done such a good job of explaining all of these choices that I think it makes a lot of sense, as he highlights. Obviously, this is a deck that is tailored to prey on those Ruby Sapphire decks, which the read was that was going to be a big part of the field. As Ed's already explained, you only need X amount of 2-0s to really be able to like guarantee your day 2, and then you already got prizing. And hey, if you then get a favorable bracket, or you could be on the play for at least 1 or 2 of those games, then the better your odds become of going all the way. So I think this is genius. Like from a predicting the meta standpoint, just going all in on what was predicted to be the best deck. And Ruby Amethyst is always like, even like Ed talked about the more stock version of Ruby Amethyst. Even that is kind of like fine into red blue if you're on like a 2/2 ladies. But if you just max out these Tremaines, and we've like Ed's already explained the synergies with the library and this amount of 1-drops and being able to prey on them being slow and maximize those Flynn Rider odds, I don't think I could do a better job of explaining it myself. What I would ask instead is, what would you say, Ed, to players that have looked at this list and seen your success with it and are now all planning on taking it to their set championships? Because as soon as you had success with this, as is the way in Lorcana, whether it's Discords, Facebook, all sorts of social media, it's the deck lists everywhere and everyone's talking about it. And there's tons of memes of like, your set championships are going to look like this, all the Tremaines, all the libraries. To people that are just going to copy paste your list, do you think they'll necessarily find the same success as you? Is there any advice that you would give on, would you stick with that list or would you adapt it slightly? Just your thoughts concerning that.
Mm-hmm. So I think it would actually be very interesting if everyone played exactly this 60, because I think that this type of deck doesn't have necessarily like any blowout games in the mirror. So for example, like if I go like 1-cost Flynn, Sisu, Rabbit, if my opponent has like 1-drop into 2 1-drops and then a Sisu and then a Rabbit, they can also match the Sisu hand size. So it's actually very possible to not lose that, right? And then after you kind of get through those first like 4 or 5 turns, it actually is like who can navigate this attrition battle the best. And I think that's what I kind of like about this game, starting from set 2 and set 3, when we play Ruby Amethyst Mirrors all day. And that was like actually my favorite thing to do, because I felt like that was a puzzle. Yeah, that was definitely like a puzzle to figure out, right? There wasn't any kind of non-games where it's like, I used to play Emerald Steel. Sometimes I just open like Diablo Shift and then like a Prince John, Sudden Chill into Hypnotize. And then you can play like Lucifer and you just like empty your opponent's entire hand. And then I'm just like doing whatever I want to do. And then just like turning sideways. I could do anything at that point. I win the game, right?
Yeah.
And I like, not to say that that's like a bad strategy, right? But it's just personally,
I'll
like,
say it's bad strategy.
Yeah,
I'll be the villain. I'll say like I'm with you. Like I like the chess mentality of the Ruby Amethyst mirror.
Yeah, I do enjoy, like I really would encourage, like if you want to get better at the game, quote unquote better at the game, I would say that this is actually a very good list to bring. And if you want to practice with like somebody else that's also playing the exact same 60, it really will showcase you like who is better at resource management and just being able to kind of convert card advantage into like lore, right? So I would encourage people to play it, because the more people that play it, it's kind of like the if everybody does it, then like the world's like perfectly intact, right? But if your local meta game is like very hostile towards it, playing a lot of like aggro strategies or like discard, then yeah, you're not gonna have a great time. And like when I first came into the tournament, I didn't expect a lot of aggro or discard. Like, of course there's going to be some, right? Yeah, like Mo and Zan, they were playing these like aggressive strategies, Kurt. So, I mean, of course you might run into them and, sometimes you just lose, right? And to me, that's like perfectly okay, because the other times you run into all the Ruby Sapphire and you're just feasting, right? So I think there's definitely a give and take, especially in Lorcana deck building. And I know like it's very popular where it's like, oh, what if you just run like 1 copy or 2 copies of certain cards? Then like I think my analogy is always like, you're taking away from somewhere, right? It's not like you have an infinite amount of sand that you can go into the tubes, right? You have to take some sand from one tube and put it in another tube. And for this tournament in particular, I know I meme a lot where it's like, oh, I'm already qualified for Worlds, right? I'm just playing for fun, right? And it's just like, well, what can I go all in on? And it's just like, well, what if a lot of the meta is just Ruby Sapphire, right? You look at the Friday LCQ like final tables, it's like 30, 40 Ruby Sapphire, like it's just like large amount of Ruby Sapphire. And I predicted that, it would definitely, it'll definitely convert to the next day, because, most people are like, oh, I won with Ruby Sapphire on Friday. I should definitely bring it again to ride the momentum, right? So based on those predictions, I was like, you know what? I don't care about any of the other matchups. I'm going to try to 2-0 Ruby Sapphire, move on to the, day 2 and just, play whatever matchups that come towards me, and most likely it will be some amount of Ruby Sapphire.
It was.
Can we see can you put the deck list up one more time?
Yeah.
Oh, I did. Yeah, so like I just want to say, like, I love how clean the deck list is. It's like mostly 4-ofs, which is like as a deck builder, I love it when you get it all to just come together, all be consistent like 4-ofs, except you got the 2/2 split on Crab and the big Sisu. If there was ever a good weekend for big Sisu, it was probably this weekend, especially in this deck. I've been a Fifth Spirit hater in Ruby Amethyst since day one. I'm sure there's metagames where it's good when more Diablos run around, I guess, but like I love to not see that card in this deck. But yeah, like if you're an up and coming competitive Lorcana player, go look at what the metagame looked like right before this weekend, and then just look at how all this makes sense. Like, yeah, just like big props on like landing on all these numbers. And like, if you would have asked any Amethyst player, I think before this weekend, if Genie's in their deck and if you can cut it, it'd be like just a resounding no. That card's insane. You have to play it. Don't think like that. Think like Ed. Put it like, make it make sense. You know, everything in this deck makes sense for the metagame that I think most people were thinking was gonna happen. So yeah, I mean, don't cut Rabbit. That's crazy. You know, don't think like that. But I mean, because you don't have to reinvent the wheel, right? It's like all these cards have seen competitive play. It's just getting them in the right combination for the right weekend. So yeah, I mean, no, seriously, props, dude. This is such a like clean deck list, and I watched every match of the entire tournament, and you had some of the like cleanest masterful play too. It was awesome. I think it was the Blurple match in like day 2 was just like crazy nuts.
The match against R&B, the library play on turn 3 or 4, I think is my favorite play from the entire weekend. So yeah, I agree.
Awesome. Yeah, we can talk about that. I mean, so basically in that spot, I had a rabbit or a library I could play. And then, like I said earlier, I saw somebody just like turn 4, you play the library, and then you just attach something to it to kind of make it like a 2-pronged attack, right? So I think before that night when I had to play him, I thought about like, okay, what are like kind of the common scenarios that Blurple can open with? And it's usually like, 1 cost, Sail, 1 cost, and then turn 3 Genie, turn 4 Elsa, right? So if there's a turn 4 Elsa that can target your Flynn, it makes your Flynn actually much worse because like they could just exert it and then challenge it, and you're kind of in a bad spot. But if you're able to kind of, quote unquote, protect it with a library where you're kind of trying to disincentivize them from doing so, then you kind of can deploy something that's actually quite difficult for your opponent to remove. And like if your library kind of survives, then you can play your rabbit the following turn and then attach something else. And if they exerted something, you can kind of challenge into a draw card and kind of get that kind of cycle engine going, right? So yeah, I did think about that kind of spot deliberately, and that's what I thought was kind of the optimal play in that spot.
Yeah, fascinating. I should have pulled that up ahead of time. Fascinating play. How did you feel going into Blurple? I know you were teched for Ruby Sapphire heavily, but what did you think of that matchup?
So I was very fortunate to be on the play. I think this matchup in particular is very play draw dependent because of the turn 2 Tipo or turn 2 Sail. When they're on the play, they get to be kind of two ink ahead of you, right? So when I'm on 4, he's on 6 already, right? When he's on the play, so he can do some way more crazy things than I can, and it makes it so kind of I'm a lot limited. I'm way more limited than he is, right? And I think in particular this setup where I'm on the draw with Tremaine, I think that's why a lot of people run Medusa, because Medusa is just like a significantly better card on the draw, right? Like you get to pick the target that is the most high impact, and you get like a 4/4 body to kind of contest on the following turn. But Tremaine is actually significantly better on the play, because usually you can limit your opponent's like cards proactively because they're kind of 1 turn behind you, and then usually your Tremaine will get a really, really juicy target. So because of that reason, like I was very fortunate to be on the play, and it did like come in, right? Like when I was on the play, I won. When he was on the play, he won. And then game 3, I was on the play again, and then I won, right? So I didn't feel like super confident because like, he was targeting the Genie War, right? So he was able to do that kind of Genie into Elsa play. And if I didn't have a removal for the Genie, that card could definitely run away with the game, right? Questing for 2 every turn is no joke. So I was thinking like, okay, I need to be, if I'm on the play, I can get my rabbit and then I can like bounce it back with my snake, brawl it on the same turn, and then I can continue the game from there, go for attrition. And usually, the problem with Blurple is that usually they're like kind of weak to going wide, right? Like the main differences between our decks, we're Amethyst decks, is that like I have Be Prepared, I have like, Big Sisu, and I have these ways to kind of clean up the board if things get too out of hand. And you can really see that in game 3 where I just went really wide, had like multiple locations, like multiple characters, and there's really no comeback mechanism in Blurple. So when you're on the draw, it's extremely rough because like, once your opponent gets 2 ahead, then you're not going to be able to come back.
What about how big? If you have any questions, feel free to jump in. If not, I do want to ask about the Zan matchup. People have been asking questions. What was it like running into him? And then Vergi19 in Twitch asked very specifically, did you feel less prepared not having Elsa or Genie, the evasives, to deal with Diablo in that matchup? Because Zan does run those very effectively.
Oh yeah, so honestly, I had an inkling that Zan and Wonderland were still going to run Emerald Steel, but I was just hoping that they would get taken out by the Ruby Sapphire, because Ruby Sapphire, like if you think about it from like our predictions, right? It's like tons of Ruby Sapphire. Should you bring Emerald Steel? Probably not, right? Like even if I was a master, I would be very scared to bring Emerald Steel, right? So I was like, well, if that's kind of the level of thinking that I'm thinking, surely everyone else could also think the same, right? And maybe they'll be also scared to bring Emerald Steel, right? So I predicted Emerald Steel to be lower just because of the prevalence of Ruby Sapphire. So I kind of, like you saw, I forgone the Genie and the Elsa, and it definitely made the matchup way harder, right? Like my only outs to Diablo are the 4 brawls, and then like maybe you get a lucky B Prep or some random Tremaine, probably not though, or like the Shift Sisu, right? And those things, basically it comes down to like basically brawl, right? Those are like kind of my early answers. And if I don't draw that correctly at the right time against Diablo, that card will run away with the game and I'll definitely lose. But I did end up facing Wonderland, and I was very fortunate to like he kind of had a bad hand in the beginning, and like winning tournaments, you definitely need to get lucky as well, right? Besides your own luck, you need your opponent to also not open the nuts on you, right? So I was very fortunate that Wonderland also didn't open the nuts on me, and I had a functional hand, right? And I think there's a meme in the kind of Ruby Amethyst community where it's like you just prey on people that low roll, right? You prey on people that open poorly, and then you play your normal game and you win by default because they can't play the game, right? And I think especially in the Emerald Steel matchup, like I think that's the case. That deck definitely has the highest of highs, but it also has the lowest of lows. And I think in game 3 versus Zan, you can definitely see that he had the lowest of lows. Like his opener was like Diablo, Calhoun, Pete. When I saw the Pete on turn 3 and not a Prince John, I was like very, very happy. I was like, wow, I get to play the game finally, right? Because if it's like Prince John, usually there's like chills, draw more cards, hypnotize, draw more cards, and then I'm out of the game, right? I that's usually the recipe of you losing the game. And he also did open Shift Diablo. Like I said, like when you're on the play, the earliest I can brawl the Diablo is 3. So usually you get like 2 draws guaranteed off of Diablo, and if I don't have that, or if he has like a hidden cove or something, it's going to be like a real uphill battle.
Yeah.
I had a question though. I'm always curious about how like big competitive teams like prepare for an event. So for your team in particular, was it y'all's goal to all just like prepare and settle on a deck that each individual person is most comfortable with, that they think is right for them? Or is the goal for everyone to end up on the same 60 and really honing on that strategy that you all come to a consensus and agree that's the best?
Yeah. So I think I'm of the philosophy that everyone should play their most comfortable deck. Like I think historically speaking, when we try to force people onto certain decks, I don't think that usually ends too well. So I think our team strategy was like, everyone kind of has their kind of deck that they're very comfortable with. Like Marshall, like he topped with like Ruby Amethyst 3 times. So, it's a natural choice to play Ruby Amethyst, right? Chris got second with Emerald Steel, but he ended up playing Ember Steel. But I think these type of steel, like Emerald Steel and Amber Steel, even though they're like very different decks, I think the play style is actually quite similar, where you're trying to like, destroy, like banish things and then go wide and then kind of stop your opponent from doing things, right? So it's like, I think that's like a difference between like playing Steel and Ruby. I feel like if you play Ruby a lot, you're probably very comfortable with Ruby decks. And if you play Steel a lot, you can probably convert that to Steel decks very easily. So I think our kind of mentality is like, everyone plays like decks that they're most comfortable with, and then we'll kind of play test into each other and figure out how all the matchups work, right? Because I think like, of course, some decks are very, very favored to others, but there are still like kind of ways that you can like add certain cards to make it not as bad, right? Like I think a very interesting choice I saw, my like fourth opponent, I think Ruby Sapphire TNU, he was playing Felicia. So I was like, why were you playing Felicia, right? It's because he wanted to deal with these, aggro strategies that are trying to go like really, really fast. And they're expecting you to play a popsicle, but you're like, no, I'm playing Felicia to like block whatever guy, you're trying to quest with. So I think it's better to probably pick the deck you're comfortable with and then kind of evaluate all the card choices within your deck and how each card choice kind of affects your matchups and then which matchups you're trying to target. I think that's probably the recipe for kind of success.
Sweet.
Interesting.
Nice.
Interesting.
So my thing that I was going to talk about was less to do with the gameplay or the deck building, and more just like, for me, Zayed versus Ed is the most cinematic match we've had in Lorcana history so far, and I'll tell you why. And to the extent, I'll give you the cliff notes because I know Liam wants to wrap up on time. We're already 10 minutes away from that. So I'll give you the cliff notes because I think I'm going to do a video about it. I like the idea of doing like significant matches and like if I feel that there's a story there and like have it be history of Lorcana. And maybe in 10 years' time, who knows? But yeah, like there's a few things that for me make it, as a story, the greatest match of all time. So for a start, you've brought this deck, which is hand-tailored to feast on Ruby Sapphire. You hit one Ruby Sapphire through all of Swiss. So already we've gone all in, and only one out of those 7 matches do we actually even find what we're looking for. So it's a fight tooth and nail nonetheless, just to get through, facing a couple of, like, I know you faced the Wizard Wonderland, who was on that Emerald Steel deck. And yeah, like, I wouldn't say your bracket was ideal. I'm sure you'd agree. But make it through to day 2. And then from as a viewer, the fact that we were brought into your match with Zan on game 3, which, don't get me wrong, at the time I was annoyed because I was like, oh, come on, I wanted to see all of this. Like, what the hell? Don't get me wrong, the other match was very, very good. Props, but I think a lot of people were like, oh, come on, you've robbed us of the first 2 games. But like it almost added to the cinema of it, right? Because we're brought in, okay, like these are 2 Disney Lorcana Challenge champions and friends / rivals, which in a minute, Ed, I'm going to ask you to like give us a bit of a history of yours and Zan's history. But for those that know, there's a bit of history there anyway. We know that you were on the play. Zan has said in his interview after his last game that he feels he's favored, but he respects that you're on the play and that you're a great player. But he feels favored. He says that pretty strongly. So we're brought in game 3. We found out that you lost game 1 on the play. So already you're against a bad matchup. You're on the play though, so you've got that advantage. He's still won. You've managed to take a game back, and we've been brought back. And like, this is maybe a bit cheesy, but it honestly was how I was visualizing it. It's like when you've got Thanos versus Iron Man, okay, and you see the fight start, and then the film cuts away and shows you some other stuff that you don't really care about, and it comes back when they're both on their last legs and they're both covered in blood and sweat and they're black and blue, and it just builds that. I didn't see what happened, but I believe that it went down. So that's already my, like, as a vision, like as a watcher, I'm invested. And then this third match, as you said, Zan had like the low roll of the Emerald Steel start, but Zan is still super respected as such a good player. I would go as far as to say, in many people's minds, is considered the best player, at least if you look at the success over the course of the season. Like there's a strong argument for people to say, hey, I think Zan is the best player in the game. So no one's going to count him out. He's playing his pet deck, but you're also playing your pet deck, champion versus champion. And then it really comes down to those last couple of turns, because it's the stare for me, just that dead-eyed stare right into his eyes. And like, I'm sure many people are interpreting it all different ways. Like, maybe you can tell us in a minute, because that's going to be my question I'm going to build to, like, was what was going through your mind during that stare. But for me, it was a matter of, like, please make a move. You've been sending so long. I just want to know if I've got it or not. To also, like, I was like, come on, let's go. I think I've got you. Have you? Come on, son, let's go. I'm going to win. Like, it felt so dramatized. It's like a soap opera in my mind. And Zan is there laying out every possible combination of cards. He even plays down the dock to draw a fresh 2 just to like have more options. And you can kind of, and again, love Zan, met Zan in France. Lovely, 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 lovely guy, and such a great player and someone I respect so much. But for me, watching him, it was that look of the slow realization that he'd lost and that there was nothing he could do. And it was like he couldn't accept it. And I'm not saying that as a dig or any negative way. It was just his will to win is so great that, like, even when he extended the hand, there was a hesitancy there for a moment, and not out of bad sportsmanship, just out of like, no, is there a way? Because, like, again, this is all a credit to the player Zan is, and like his will to win and wanting to like exhaust every possible option, but just that slow realization across his face and his body language that there was nothing that he could do, that you'd secured it and you're staring at him the whole time. Cinema, absolute cinema. So I'm going to ask you that question, Ed. What was going through your mind as you are staring Zan dead in the eye for a good minute?
Yeah. So yeah, I am friends / rivals, right, with Zan. And I've had him on like my personal like podcast, right? And we do go way back, right, to CCS, original CCS AK, right? Mm-hmm. And I lost to him in the finals, right? And I was on the play, and I lost, right? And I think ever since then, there was a drive where it's like, you know, someday I'll get my day, right? And it's really funny that in Vegas, he actually took out 3 of my teammates, like basically like back to back in day 2, right? So he basically defeated my whole team, right? Like, yeah, he defeated my entire team, right, up to the finals. Right, Chris lost him in the finals in the mirror, and I think ever since then, it's like, you know, I'm not trying to target him, right, and especially, yeah, like you said, I'm bringing a very unfavored deck into Emerald Steel, in terms of like I'm just trying to target Ruby Sapphire. But I mean, it's not like I lost immediately, right? There's still some ways to beat the deck, but it's definitely an uphill climb. And I remember in Game 3 when he played Pete. And I could see his kind of body language, like kind of like, oh, this is a not good opener, right? And I think the exact moment I saw that like the, you know, chink in his armor, as it were, right, was in that game he played an Ursula on turn 5, and he saw my hand was a big Sisu that I was about to shift on him, right? And as soon as he saw that, I saw his face like, oh, I am dead. Right. And I shifted the Sisu, turned everything sideways, right? And then that moment he was like, you know, oh, I need to like actually trade my entire board into the Sisu or else I'm gonna lose the race. And I think something very rare that, I mean, nobody else caught it, but maybe it doesn't catch audio, right? But something very uncommon is that Zan started kind of narrating the game a little bit. And I think because of this, it kind of made it so I didn't really have to play the game anymore. So once you start narrating the game, I was like, okay, I'll just do whatever you want to do. So he's like, if you just, you know, quest with everything, how do I deal with this? I was like, oh, okay, let me quest with everything. I'm going to play my Tremaine. I'm just going to ignore whatever you're trying to do and present this question back to you. And on that last turn, after I played the Tremaine, I was even thinking, like, I didn't have to do anything, right? So it was his turn. I was like, how can he get out of this, right? And, you know, he really did try really hard to, like, exhaust whatever he could in order to find the answers. But I don't think there was any possible way he could do that. So I think it was really funny with this stare, because it's like, I was kind of just enjoying the moment for myself, right? Like,
Yeah.
Like, it was basically like a culmination of the last, you know, ever since March, like almost 1 year of this kind of rivalry where it's like, will I ever get my shot at Zan ever again?
And that's exactly what I mean. That's what makes
that was it. Yeah.
That's that the backstory, the fact that you're both champions, and like again, just the way it played out. Like, in my opinion, the most cinematic, best story Lorcana has had so far, and we got that in its first year. Like, it could have easily been 3-4 years before we got like an actual an arc like that. So I think that's absolutely awesome. And like, for what it's worth, as long as I have a voice, I will speak of the greatness of that, because it was great. But yeah, like you say, that moment where he just knew it was over, like, because I was rewatching the match, and I've got a shot up on my own screen, because you're sitting here with Double Fox, Crab, Snake, Chernabog, Tremaine, and a library. Tremaine and Chernabog are at the library. You're at 18 lore. Like, I'm like, same as you, I'm thinking, I don't think there's anything in Zan's deck that could possibly stop this, but still. And again, I say this fully to his credit, like Zan, like just the will to win. I think sometimes that is what gets some players over the finish line. They spend that much longer thinking about all the possible outs. And yeah, I think it's one for the absolute ages. And yeah, massive congratulations to you, mate, on incredible achievement.
Yeah, I mean, no offense to, like, you know, the finals, right? Obviously, that was okay. Honestly, okay. After I won that game, I was like, it's like a just sigh of relief for me, right? Like, I remember going out, I saw Chris, and then it's like I was very, very, very happy that I was able to win that game. And to me, that brought a little bit back of that kind of Dallas, like, joy. You know what I mean?
Excitement. Yeah.
Excitement. Yeah. And after that, I was like shaking. You know what I mean? Like, I worked really hard for that moment. And of course, the finals, maybe it's because, Ruby Sapphire, I literally built my deck for that. So I was just like, okay, we'll just play, like, let the cards lie where they may, right?
It was still a great match. Because, hey, like, Scott was second seed, right? Like, he'd been on an absolute tear all through day one, and then obviously made it all the way to the finals. And like, again, I'll be honest, Scott was a player that I didn't know just from first look. Came to remember that he has topped before, but like his professionalism, like just to watch him play was a real pleasure, because he strikes me as a very, very good player. Like, obviously got to the finals, so got to be doing something right. But no, it was great to watch Scott play. And even though that's the match that you exactly planned for, if there was anyone on that in combination that could still beat you and on the play, it was probably going to be the second seed from the last 2 days, right?
Yeah. So it was really funny because I guess, the camera didn't catch us either. But as soon as we sat down, I already can tell he was like, oh, we're just going through formalities. You're going to beat me. Like, he was extremely defeated before the game even started. Like, he literally, like, shuffled his deck and just, like, plopped it down, like, of defeat. He's just like, well, I know who I'm putting my money on, right? So I think it's also very psychological, right? Like, I think having a strong mental, game, even 100%. Through, like, unfavored matchups, is something that you need to keep a level head on. And I think maybe going after this tournament, he'll probably like, let me try my absolute best. And I guess that's what separates, like, the good from the great, right? Like you said, Zan, no matter what, in the face of anything, he's going to try his absolute hardest. And it's something I really respect him for. And it's something that I also strive to do, right? Like, when I face Zan, it's like, oh, I'm very unfavored, but I'm going to play my heart out and let the cards fall where they may.
Where they may. Yeah, that was great. And shout out to Mo, who I just saw in chat, who was another player that I really enjoyed watching play over the weekend. Like, real master of that deck. 16 1-drops, love it.
Yeah, he said my game plan every time is 1 on turn 1, 2 on turn 2. Two 1-drops. Go wide.
I mean, it's that kind of meta, right? Like outside
Yeah.
of the Sapphire decks, generally it's free 1-drop meta, right?
Oh man, I could talk to you all day long. This is a fantastic group. I do want to wrap here shortly. Before we do, if you all permit me, I do have the moment or the very end here of this game. I think we're gonna see the triple library, and this is the moment where
rent is due. The rent is due. The landlord, Ed Chiu.
What's going through your head here, Ed? I mean, you've got 2 games. You're a game up already. You're 17 lore, or no, you're down. What's going on here?
Okay, so personally, I wasn't really that worried. I think there was only one turn window where he could have won with like a Shark Vitalisphere and then gain 3 lore. But other than that, 17 is quite difficult for his deck to gain 3 lore because he doesn't run Lucky Dime. So I think a couple turns before this, there was like a turn where it's like, okay, I'm okay letting him get this one last lore, and that's it. You're gonna get cut off for the rest of the game. Because basically I was setting up my hand in a way where I would have all removal in my hand and draw cards, right? And those draw cards will get you more removal. And then eventually you draw your whole deck and then you set up these libraries, bounce goat a couple times, and you win the game. And I think basically in these type of spots, you just kind of slowly increment your lore, right? And I think the perfect card for this was library, because like it's not a huge investment, but it actually has tons of willpower and is very hard to remove. And you gain the lore every turn, right? You remember Spellbook from like, set 2 or set 3. It's exactly that, but significantly better with way more upside. So after I got to this point particularly, I already knew I had the game like locked up, and there was actually no way for him to really win unless he specifically had the Shark with the Pirate's Life. So at this point, I also remember some people asked me like, oh, why didn't you play like Be Prepared a long time ago? It's because of exactly this position where once you set up a bunch of locations and you can play Be Prepared, the game is just instantly over. There's no way to remove the library, and I'm just going to slowly, get my way to 20. So from here, yeah, like, anything you play, I'm just going to remove, or I can bounce goat a couple of times and finish the game whenever I please.
And this was another like perfect part of the story, to be honest. The fact that you finished with like in the finals, different match, but with as you rightfully said in the interview with Rebecca, the signature triple location play, which like it's like that was a plan right from the beginning. Like, yeah, I'm gonna day 2. I'm gonna get to the finals. I'm gonna finish on triple library. That's the out right from the beginning.
Yeah,
dude, and Scott held on to these T-pos for dear life the entire game to try to counter these Lady Tremaines. Like, props to him too. Like, he did his best.
He played super well. Yeah, hats off to Scott again. It was a pleasure to watch him pilot this deck over the weekend for sure.
And I think something to credit Scott is like actually he kind of figured out certain lines. I think between the games, because he kind of noticed like, oh, if I play these T-pos or Hirams like kind of separately from my big threat, he could just play big Sisu, and then now I'm like vulnerable again, right? So he kind of had some heads up play where it's like, oh, let me make sure I set up my board in a way that I can't just like easily remove everything turn by turn, but instead overwhelm my opponent by playing those things in like sets. So yeah, he tried his best, but I think from my perspective of like if I was him, right? Like I would also have a very hard time, right? Like who's playing 4 Tremaine, 4 library, like kind of decks? Literally nobody, right? So it's like, when do you get to practice against this? Literally never. So I think it was quite a difficult like kind of uphill climb. And like I was practicing Ruby Sapphire and playing against Ruby Sapphire for like the past who knows how long, right? So I know that kind of matchup like the back of my hand. So I already know what he was trying to do, but he wasn't really like aware of what I was trying to do. So it's also very kind of reminiscent of when I played against like DKP in the top 16. That was like my first feature match, and I was like very nervous right at the time, like never been featured. And I remember he did a very similar thing to me, right? He did like turn 3 grandma, how far I'll go, another grandma, 2 more how far I'll goes, and then another how far I'll go after that. And it was like the same spot where he had like 8 ink, 10 ink, and I had like 4 ink. but I played it exactly the same way, where it's like, I'm just going to try my best to kind of draw some more cards and then control the board, because the downside of Shark is like, yes, it can gain a couple lore here and there, but eventually it'll just, get hit by the B prep, and like it's actually just an overall negative, right? So I think in that matchup, it's just a matter of being patient and kind of let your opponent gain some lore, and then after that, take control of the game.
Man, I tell you what, I'm gonna have to watch this episode back like 4 times to glean all of the knowledge that you dropped on us tonight, Ed. I really appreciate it. If you're watching, we're gonna wrap up here shortly. Don't go anywhere, because I'm about to go around and ask all of our guests where people can follow them and what they're up to next. Before I do that, just want to plug next week's show, next Monday at 8 o'clock. We'll be back with another live show. As of right now, we're bringing on a couple top 8 finishers. We'll have Mo Shamblin on to talk about his performance and his Emerald Amethyst deck. And we'll also be joined by Sailor to talk about his Ruby Sapphire build and his thoughts on the tournament. So a couple great guests at the very least. That's the plan right now. Of course, everything is subject to change, and we always have surprises. And also, don't miss the video we dropped today where we interviewed Zach Bivens last week about his deck choice at that moment and his thoughts going into the tournament. So there's a great chance to see now what he was thinking back then and compare it to where he ended up. It's a really interesting way to get in the mind of somebody preparing for a tournament in that moment without the benefit of hindsight. So that's another great video. With that, Hal, thanks for joining us this evening. Thanks for all the help this weekend on the Card Viewer. What are you up to content-wise, and how can people follow you?
I'm at Lorcana on X or Twitter or whatever it's called these days, and YouTube. Been a little bit of a break in content with the move in the holidays, but I should have some new videos going up probably next week or so.
Yeah. Make sure you share the link to us so we can blast it out on socials as well, because we miss your content. Sure. Baker, thanks again for staying up late and joining us. It is always a pleasure, and I never take it for granted. You are the best. How can people follow you, and what do you have going on?
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure, and a pleasure to be joined by yourselves, Hal and Ed. You can find me on Twitter or YouTube at Lorcana Villain. If you don't know me, I'm the deck list guy, I suppose is probably the best way to put it. Yes. There's gameplay footage coming out over the next few days. We had the Content Creator Set Championships in London on the Friday. Obviously that's gone under the carpet while I was focused on enjoying the North American Championships. But now that that's done, those videos will be going up over the next few days. And as I said at the beginning, I'm super excited about my new desk, and I'm planning some streams to play some paper games, which is new for the channel. So hopefully that'll be fun. And hopefully before too long, I will be ready to announce plans for my Lorcana D&D series that I've got coming.
What?
So fans of if you're a fan of D&D and of Lorcana, which if you're not and you're here, then what you're doing here, then it might be some super exciting, unique Lorcana content coming, hopefully in the not too distant future. So stand by.
Well, if you have a wait list for participants in this D&D game, just pencil me in. That's fantastic. And we have to close with, again, the champion himself, Mr. Ed Chiu. What's next for you other than Worlds, and how can people follow you in your content?
It's kind of weird, right? Like I was practicing for so long for this tournament, and it's like, well, now what, right? Because I guess there's some like set champs I can go play at, do my rounds or whatever. But other than that, I'm just kind of hanging out, enjoying the game, right? And it's really nice that Lorcana has a really nice community, right? Like after I won, like I got tons of messages, tons of people like coming up to me, congratulating me, and for now I'm just kind of enjoying the moment, right? So for now, I think I'm just relaxing and maybe, throw a couple games here and there, but just hanging out and just enjoying the game as it were before.
That's awesome. Any other closing thoughts?
Lorcana's great. It's such a fun game, and make a lot of friends along the way, and I wouldn't have it any other way.
That's
amazing. I'm ready for set champs. I gotta go win one of these star play mats. So
yeah.
I came ninth. I was fuming. So I've got set champs the next 2 weekends, because if you think I'm not getting one of them scars, then
Yeah.
News for you.
He
Competitive spirit.
Right.
Yeah.
That is his song you sing. So yeah, it seems appropriate.
Well, actually,
With
I
that-
need to get Ed to sign one of mine. So like I have my 4 be prepared in my mind. I have one signed by Zanzayed from Paris. I think I need to get Ed to sign the other one, and then in my mind it's Bivens and DeCandio. Those are my like. I think that's my Mount Rushmore. There are a lot of honorable mentions I could give, but yeah. So one day I will be prepared to hopefully signed by Ed.
That's right.
Yeah, I'll
You
be
have
at
to play
Worlds,
in the
so
game with Ed.
yeah, see you there.
All right. Well, with that, thanks everybody for joining us. We'll be back next week at 8 o'clock Monday.